I never thought a stupid prank at a party would turn into one of the most awkward moments of my life. Honestly, if you told me 6 months ago that I'd be standing in the middle of my best friend's living room pretending to be his boyfriend, I'd probably have laughed in your face. But there I was, arms half around him, trying to look chill while my brain screamed, "What the hell are you doing?" So yeah, let me back up a bit. I'm Jake, 27, and I've known Eric since college. We met in a philosophy class and somehow became inseparable. Despite the fact that we're total opposites, he's the outgoing, spontaneous type, while I'm more of a quiet, sarcastic observer. Most people assume we're a couple because of how close we are, and honestly, for a long time, I never minded the idea. Eric's pretty good looking, funny, and the kind of person who lights up a room just by walking in. But until recently, I never thought about him in any other way than as my best friend. That night, we were at this party hosted by a mutual friend downtown. Nothing too crazy, just a bunch of people from work and school catching up, drinking a bit, and messing around. Eric's prankster side was in full swing, and he'd already convinced half the room that we were together, mostly just to mess with a couple of nosy coworkers who always teased him about his dating life. Then came the challenge. Why don't you two just pretend to be a couple for the whole night? Bet you'll totally convince everyone. Eric looked at me with this mischievous grin, that one that means he's already cooked up something ridiculous. I was hesitant, but part of me thought, why not? It's just a joke and I've got nothing to lose. At first it was easy. We'd stand close, act casual when people ask questions, and throw in a few playful touches here and there, nothing too weird. But as the night went on and the drinks flowed, things got less pretend and more complicated. Eric started leaning in closer when we talked, and his usual teasing took on a different tone, soft, almost uncertain. And then, right when I thought I was about to breathe a sigh of relief because the prank was winding down, he suddenly moved closer, like way closer. I could feel his breath, warm and nervous, and then he just kind of paused, looking me right in the eyes. I honestly couldn't tell if it was part of the joke or if he was actually about to kiss me. Spoiler alert, he tried. I froze. Not because I was grossed out or anything like that. It was more like my brain just short-circuited. I had no idea how to react. And honestly, neither did he. That moment completely changed everything between us. The prank didn't just blow up. It exploded into something neither of us expected. And now I'm stuck trying to figure out what comes next. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And if you think it's awkward now, wait until you hear what happened right after. For a second, we just stood there, frozen like a couple of idiots caught mid-scene in some awkward rom-com. Eric's eyes were wide, and honestly, mine probably looked like I'd just seen a ghost, or at least a ghost I wasn't sure if I wanted to be haunted by. He pulled back just as quickly as he'd leaned in, the mischievous grin from earlier completely wiped from his face. Sorry, he blurted out, rubbing the back of his neck like a kid who just got caught sneaking cookies from the jar. That was, part of the prank? He gave me a shaky smile, but I could tell it wasn't true. I forced a laugh, trying to act casual even though my heart was doing some kind of crazy drum solo. Yeah, totally. The prank where we almost kiss but then freak out and ruin everything. I tried to sound joking, but the truth was, part of me wanted to say something else. Something honest, but I didn't know how. The room felt suddenly smaller, louder, and way more intense. People were still milling about, chatting and laughing, but it was like we were behind some invisible curtain that no one else could see. Neither of us looked away or moved apart immediately. It was like the air between us had shifted, charged but fragile. So, you're not mad? Eric asked, breaking the silence. I shook my head. No, I'm not mad, just surprised. That's all. He gave me a half smile like he was trying to read my expression, or maybe just hoping I wouldn't make things weird. Look, he said quietly, I didn't plan for it to happen. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to kiss you or just mess with you. I blinked. Mess with me? Yeah, he shrugged. You've always been the straight guy the first can tease. But lately, I don't know, I think I've been messing with you by accident. I looked away, because now my brain was trying to catch up, and the honest truth was kind of terrifying. I'd never really thought about Eric like that before, but now that the idea was out there, it felt like this whole new world had cracked open. So what happens now? I asked, my voice quieter than usual. Eric looked at me like I'd just asked the most important question in the world. Honestly, no clue. Maybe we figure it out, or maybe we just pretend this never happened and call it a night. I didn't want to pretend, though. Not anymore. The rest of the party passed in a blur. We stayed close. Not quite touching, but definitely not distant either. People kept congratulating us on how convincing we'd been, totally buying the whole fake couple act. Every time someone mentioned it, I felt a knot in my stomach, equal parts excitement and panic. After the last guest left, Eric and I ended up sitting on the couch, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. The prank was over, but the night wasn't. I realized that for the first time, I was looking at Eric differently, like maybe all those jokes and teasing had been hiding something deeper. I never thought I'd say this. I started, but tonight was kind of a turning point. He smiled, soft and genuine. Yeah? Me too. And just like that, something shifted, not in some dramatic way, but in a quiet, real way that made me think maybe this prank was the best mistake we'd ever made. I don't want to mess things up, I said, but maybe we should talk about what this means. Eric nodded. Agreed. No more pretending, no more pranks. Just us. Figuring it out. It wasn't going to be easy, and I had no idea where this was headed. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Right there, next to him, ready to see what came next. The next day was weird. In that painfully awkward way where you want to text someone, but also kind of don't want to make things more complicated. I spent half the morning staring at my phone, scrolling through old messages with Eric like I was searching for some secret code that would tell me what to do next. Spoiler, no such code existed. Eventually, I gave in and sent a simple, "Hey about last night," and then immediately regretted it. What could I even say? Sorry you tried to kiss me, and I froze like a deer in headlights? Didn't sound like the smoothest opening line. To my surprise, Eric replied almost instantly. Yeah, about that. Can we talk? Like for real? We agreed to meet at our usual coffee spot later that afternoon. I showed up first, nervously tapping my foot, trying not to overthink everything. When Eric walked in with that same half smile and those bright eyes, I felt a weird mix of excitement and dread. So he said, sliding into the seat across from me, I guess we need to figure out if this prank turned into something serious or if we just totally ruined our friendship. I laughed, a little too loudly, because honestly, it felt like the question that would decide everything. Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, huh? He nodded, then leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Look, I know I've always been the funny guy, the one who jokes about everything, including us. But the truth is, I've been thinking about you a lot lately, more than just as a friend. I blinked. Really? Yeah, he said, eyes locked on mine. I didn't expect it either. I wasn't even sure if you'd feel the same, so I kept it buried. But last night, when I almost kissed you, it just felt like it was time to stop hiding. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. I wanted to tell him the same thing, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just nodded, because honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to say it out loud yet. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, how this changed the way we saw each other, the fears we had about messing things up, and the weird excitement of maybe trying something new. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments where we both stumbled over words or laughed nervously, but it was real. By the time we left the coffee shop, the sun was setting, casting this warm glow over the city that somehow made everything feel okay. As we walked side by side, I realized that whatever happened next, things weren't going back to the way they were before. The days that followed were a mix of awkwardness and discovery. We started hanging out more, but with this new layer underneath that neither of us really talked about outright. Sometimes Eric would brush his hand against mine, and we'd both freeze for a second before pulling back, pretending it was nothing. One night, we ended up at his apartment watching a movie. Halfway through, he reached out and took my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed his fingers, and he smiled like I'd just given him the best gift in the world. I don't want to rush anything, he said quietly, but I also don't want to pretend this isn't real. I nodded. Me neither. That simple moment felt like the start of something, even if neither of us had all the answers yet. Of course, not everything was perfect. There were days when I caught myself overthinking every text or reading too much into a look. And Eric? He had his moments of doubt too, especially when it came to how people would react if they found out. One afternoon we were walking through the park and he suddenly stopped, looking serious. "Do you think we're ready for people to know? Like, really know?" I shrugged, trying to sound confident. "I don't know. Maybe. But honestly, I think I'm more worried about what it means for us if we keep hiding." He smiled softly. "Yeah, me too." It was scary, stepping into something unknown with someone you care about so much. But I also realized that sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards. Looking back, I never thought a prank would lead me here, to this messy, beautiful, confusing place where friendship and something more collided. And while I'm still figuring out what it all means, one thing's for sure. I don't want to do it without Eric. Not now. Not ever. A couple of weeks passed, and things between Eric and me settled into this strange, fragile rhythm. We weren't exactly official or anything. Hell, we hadn't even really talked about what we were. But there was this unspoken understanding, a softness in the way we looked at each other, and the way our hands seemed to find each other without even trying. One Friday evening, Eric invited me over to his place for dinner. It was casual. He joked that he was testing out a new recipe and needed a guinea pig. I showed up with a bottle of wine and half a dozen excuses for why I might be a terrible cook myself. But all that disappeared when I saw him in the kitchen, apron on, humming to some old rock song. "Hey, stranger," he said, flashing that grin that always made my knees weak. "Glad you could make it." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Wouldn't miss it. We ended up cooking together. Well, Eric mostly cooked, and I mostly did the dishes and tried not to burn anything. The kitchen was crowded, cozy, and filled with laughter that felt easy, like we'd been doing this forever. After dinner, we moved to the couch, wine glasses in hand, and the city lights flickering outside the window. That's when things started feeling different. Not in a huge, dramatic way, but in a way that made my heart race without warning. Eric looked at me like he was about to say something important, and I could tell he was nervous. So he began, fiddling with his glass. "Do you wanna, maybe try being something more than just friends pretending to be a couple?" I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how loud my heartbeat sounded in my ears. "Yeah, I think I do." His smile grew, this mix of relief and happiness that made me wonder how I'd missed it before. Me too. The next few moments were a blur. We edged closer, the space between us shrinking until we were practically touching. And then, just like that, I leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, hesitant, and completely electric. After we pulled away, neither of us said a word for a while. We just sat there, hands tangled, faces flushed, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, Eric broke the silence. "So how does it feel?" I grinned, feeling this warmth spread through my chest. "Honestly, better than I thought it would." He laughed, that easy sound that made all the tension melt away. "Good. Because I was pretty sure you were going to run screaming." "I might have," I admitted, "but you caught me at a good moment." That night marked a turning point. We stopped pretending and started figuring out what it meant to be us. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of uncertainty, awkward conversations, and the occasional fear of messing everything up. But there was also this incredible feeling of being seen and accepted for who we really were. One afternoon, we decided to take a day trip to the coast. We packed a bag, grabbed coffee, and hit the road with no real plan other than to get away and enjoy the day. The ocean was cold and wild, crashing against the rocks with a fierce energy that somehow matched the way I felt inside. Eric and I walked along the shore, talking about everything from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. At one point, he stopped, looked at me with those intense eyes, and said, "I'm glad we took this chance, even though it scared the hell out of me." "Me too," I said, reaching out to hold his hand. "It's scary, but it feels right." We sat down on a big rock, watching the waves roll in. I rested my head on his shoulder, And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. Of course, not everyone was immediately on board with our new dynamic. When we finally told a few close friends, there were questions, some surprise, and a few awkward moments. But the support outweighed the doubts, and that made all the difference. One night, Eric and I were at a small get-together with friends, and someone asked, "So how did you two actually start dating?" Was it one of those "we were friends"? Then, one day it just happened. Stories? I glanced at Eric, who gave me a playful smirk. "Something like that," I said. Eric nodded. It all started as a prank, and then, well, the prank kind of became real. The room laughed, and I felt a warmth spread through me. It wasn't just the story that mattered. It was the fact that this, whatever this was ours. Real, messy, imperfect, and completely worth it. Looking back, I never imagined that pretending to be a couple would lead to the best thing that ever happened to me. But sometimes, life throws you curveballs in the most unexpected ways. And when it does, all you can do is catch them and hold on tight. A few weeks after that day trip to the coast, things were settling into what felt like a comfortable, if slightly unfamiliar, new normal for Eric and me. We'd officially moved out of the prank-turned-whatever-this-is phase and into the okay, so now what phase. And to be honest, sometimes the now what part was more confusing than I expected. One Saturday afternoon, Eric texted me to come over. No explanation, just, "Come over, need to talk." When I arrived, he was pacing in his living room, a little more nervous than usual, which, coming from Eric, was saying something. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice light even though my stomach was doing a slow drum roll. He stopped pacing and looked at me with those wide, sincere eyes. "I've been thinking about us," I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds promising." "Yeah, well," he chuckled nervously, "it's also kind of terrifying. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I want things to be official. Like, really official. Not just us messing around or pretending or whatever. I want to tell people. I want to be your boyfriend." I blinked. This was the moment I knew was coming but hadn't fully prepared for. "You want to be my boyfriend?" I repeated, my heart pounding. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer. "I know we've been dancing around this for a while, but I'm done dancing. I want us. Like, openly. No more hiding." I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Relief, excitement, fear. But mostly, it felt like the right thing. "I want that too," I said, and suddenly the weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying started to lift. We spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, little things like what to say when friends ask, and bigger things like how to tell our families. It felt real, like we were stepping into something new together, and I couldn't stop smiling. But of course, life doesn't just hand you easy days on a silver platter. A few nights later, we were out at a bar with some friends when the inevitable happened. "So, how long have you two been together?" someone asked, raising an eyebrow. Eric and I exchanged a quick glance. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Recently," Eric said, scratching the back of his head. "Cool." The friend nodded, but I caught the slight hesitation in his voice. "So you're, like, serious?" That question hung in the air between us, heavier than I expected. Eric gave me a look that said, "You want to handle this?" And I nodded. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "We're serious." There was a pause, then the friend smiled. "Good for you guys." It was a small moment, but it felt huge, like a crack in the wall that had held us back was finally breaking down. I felt a rush of something burning warm in my chest. Pride, maybe, or hope. After that night, Eric and I started telling more people. Some were surprised, others supportive, and a few clearly struggled with the idea, but we faced it all together. It wasn't always easy. There were awkward conversations, uncomfortable questions, and moments when I wondered if we were moving too fast or if we were just fooling ourselves. One evening, a few weeks later, Eric and I were sitting on his couch, nursing beers, and talking about a podcast we both liked. Out of nowhere, he reached over and took my hand. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice low. "Shoot. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't done that stupid prank?" I thought about it for a moment. "All the time," he smiled softly. "Me too, but I don't regret it." Neither do I. It was strange how something that started as a joke had turned into this complicated, beautiful thing. I had to admit, the idea of us as a real couple was still a little surreal, but it felt right. We talked late into the night about fears and hopes, about what we wanted and what scared us. And in that quiet space, I realized just how much I cared about Eric, not just as my best friend, but as someone I wanted to build something with. The next morning, I woke up with his hand in mine and a smile on my face. Maybe this was the start of something new, messy and unpredictable, but also real and worth it. And honestly, I was ready to see where it went. The morning sunlight was filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across Eric's face as he lay there, still half asleep with his hand comfortably wrapped around mine. I couldn't help but smile. It felt surreal in the best way, like this was a moment stolen from some slow, sweet movie where everything else faded away. "Morning," I muttered, leaning over to press a kiss to his forehead. He blinked a few times, then grinned. "Morning. You're in a good mood." I shrugged, still holding his hand. "I think I'm just happy." "Weird, huh?" "Nah," he said, stretching lazily. "I am too." Feels like we're finally on the same page. It was funny, because after all the back and forth, the hesitation, and the usual stupid overthinking I do, here we were, just two guys who'd somehow stumbled into something that felt like it might actually stick. But of course, life loves to throw in curveballs when you least expect it. Later that day, we decided to go grab some lunch at this little Mexican place that had become our go-to spot. The kind of place where the chips are free, the music is loud, and no one judges you for ordering 3 tacos. Eric was animatedly telling me about a new project he was working on at work, and I was just glad to see him so excited. Then, out of nowhere, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression flickering for a second, a flash of hesitation that caught my attention. It was a text from his sister. I watched him read, and then put the phone down with a sigh. "Everything okay?" I asked, nudging him gently. He shrugged, but there was a tension in his jaw I hadn't seen before. "She's just not sure about this whole us thing yet. I told her we're figuring it out, but I guess she's worried." I nodded slowly. Family reactions were always a wild card. I'd been lucky. My folks were pretty open-minded, but Eric's family was more traditional, and I knew that was weighing on him. "Want to talk about it?" I offered. He hesitated a beat, then looked at me with those earnest eyes. "I'm scared, Jake. What if this ruins how they see me? Or worse, what if they don't see you the way I do? I don't want to lose them, but I don't want to lose this either." That hit hard. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Hey, you won't lose me, and you won't lose them either. It might take time, but if they care about you, they'll come around." He smiled, but there was still that shadow lingering in his eyes. The conversation hung with us the rest of lunch, but I could tell it was a weight Eric was carrying alone in some ways. I wanted to fix it for him, but some things you just have to face yourself. Over the next few days, the Converse family talk became the unspoken challenge we both knew was coming. Eric was quiet, sometimes distracted, and I tried to give him space while also being there in the way I knew he needed. One evening, he surprised me by inviting me over after work with this nervous energy I hadn't seen since the prank night. "Okay," he said, pacing his living room. "I'm going to tell them. Tomorrow." My heart jumped. "Tomorrow? Serious?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I'm done waiting. I want to be honest. With them and with myself." I didn't say anything for a moment because, honestly, I was proud of him. Brave, even. "I'm here. Whatever you need." He smiled, and just like that, the air between us shifted, charged with determination and a little fear. The next day was a blur. Eric went home for dinner, and I stayed on standby, nerves jangling like a kid, waiting for report card day. That night, he texted me, "They're surprised, not mad, just processing." I breathed out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Over the next week, we talked a lot. Some conversations were tough, some were hopeful. Eric's sister reached out, asking questions, trying to understand. His parents were quieter but didn't shut him out. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And through it all, Eric and I grew closer. The challenges outside somehow made us more solid inside. One night, we were sitting on the couch, the TV playing some forgettable show, when he leaned over and kissed me softly. "I'm glad I did it," he whispered. "Me too," I said, wrapping my arms around him. It wasn't just about being out or official. It was about living honestly and knowing we had each other's backs through whatever came next. Now, looking back at how it all started, two friends pretending to be a couple for a dumb prank, I couldn't help but laugh. Life's got a funny way of messing with you, but sometimes those mess-ups turn into something real. And for once, I was all in. Months passed, and with each one, Eric and I found our groove. Not perfect, not without hiccups, but ours. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by something steady and genuine. Our relationship wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and that was more than enough. One evening, we took a walk through the city park, the kind of quiet night where the air feels crisp but inviting. We talked about everything and nothing, the usual mix of work frustrations, dumb jokes, and those little moments that make life feel alive. At one point, Eric stopped and looked at me, his eyes soft in the glow of the street lamp. "You know," he said, "I can't believe this all started as a stupid prank." I chuckled. "Neither can I, but honestly I'm glad it did." He smiled, then reached out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Me too. You've become more than I ever expected." "More than a prank partner?" I teased. He laughed, then pulled me close. "A lot more." As we stood there, the city humming quietly around us, I realized how far we'd come, from pretending to be something we weren't, to becoming something real together. It wasn't magic or a sudden epiphany. It was the slow, steady unfolding of trust, courage, and care. I squeezed his hand and said, "Whatever comes next, I want to figure it out with you." Eric nodded and kissed me gently, a promise in that simple touch. Me too, no more pretending. Walking back, side by side, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the chilly night. It was the kind of warmth that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be, with someone who sees you, challenges you, and chooses you every day. And in that moment, I knew that prank or not, this was the realest thing I'd ever had.